Hello, everyone. We are on another What Moves Her podcast. This is Sherry Chris, and I am so excited today to have one of my colleagues and a woman that I've gotten to know fairly well, and I'm so impressed with everything that she does for us. Becky Tallent, who's our Vice President of Government Affairs, which to me sounds very scary, but I know it's not. Becky, I'm thrilled to have you on. We're going to talk all things government that we can. But first of all, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much. I'm so excited to be here. I've been following these podcasts as you've been putting them out, and I've been hoping that I'd have an opportunity to join. So I'm super excited to be here. Thank you for inviting me.
Oh, my pleasure. My pleasure. And as we get started, well, you've had quite an interesting career. And so I want to take us back to the early days and, what was your first job?
Well, my very first job ever was working in a retirement community in Tucson, Arizona. But my first job as a grown-up professional was on Capitol Hill, answering telephones in Senator John McCain's office. I grew up in Arizona. I was a huge admirer of his growing up. I grew up in a military family, so public service and military service was something that was instilled to us at a young age as being incredibly important and something that we should be honored to do. I think that helped lead me into the political world. I think sometimes people think about politics in a way that's, kind of shady or, in a negative light, but it really is, at the end of the day, it really is public service, and people really do give a lot of themselves and their time to trying to do the right thing in government, and like I said, in the halls of Capitol Hill. So I spent about 15 years on Capitol Hill. My first day was actually August 12th, 2001, which is, obviously right before September 11th. And then we were hit with anthrax in the halls of Congress right after that. So it was definitely an interesting time to join. Expected to be there for a year and then maybe do grad school or law school or something like that. And then 15 years later, I was still there. So I just was really lucky to get opportunity after opportunity and have some incredible adventures while I was up there.
Well, adventures for sure. So let's talk. I have 3 questions right now.
Okay.
What was John McCain like? And did you get to interact with him personally? Obviously, you did.
Yeah, I actually got to spend a lot of time with him. I did almost every job in his office, my final job being his chief of staff in 2012. So he and I got to know each other personally very well. I also led his work on trying to get immigration reform done. And so that was one of his top policy priorities while I was there. And so, it was funny because I was so young, but I really just didn't even have the opportunity to get intimidated or to have the time to get nervous about the people that I was running into, because I was given a very clear directive from my boss to get something done and to make progress on this incredibly important issue. And so he and I just kind of hit the ground running, even at, I think I was, 24, 25 at the time, trying to get immigration reform done. And unfortunately, we haven't gotten there yet, but it's still, just as a case study, it was such an incredible opportunity for me to learn the political process, learn how things work in Congress, learn how to navigate incredibly challenging political situations. And he was a fierce advocate of mine. I think that's one of the things that is a story that is not told about him, is that he was a fierce advocate for women in his office. He gave us amazing opportunities. He didn't care who you were, what you were. He just wanted you, if you were hardworking and you were there for the right reasons, he would give you the opportunity. And I was his chief of staff at 32, which in the Republican halls of chiefs of staff is both incredibly young and frankly fairly rare to have a female chief of staff at that time in the early 2000s. But all that mattered to him was that I was there to do the job and to get the job done and to serve the people of Arizona. And so he had faith in me. And I think looking back now, 10 plus years later, there are probably things I would probably do differently and things I definitely learned from, but I'll always be grateful for that incredible leap of faith and opportunity that he gave me.
What an incredible opportunity. And yes, he always struck me as someone who was so inclusive and particularly of women. So what a great learning ground for you. But I have to ask you, Becky, what was it like there? Were you there on September 11th? Because every year we talk about where we were September 11th. I actually got stranded in Newfoundland where,
Yeah.
so many of the planes landed.
Yeah.
But what was it like for you there?
It was, gosh, this could be an entire podcast in and of
I
itself,
know.
right? I was, as young staffers back then, I was pounding out letters in response to Boy Scouts that had written in the morning. And I asked a colleague a question, and he said, I think you need to turn on the TV. There's something happening. I do remember that, again, I'd been there 3 weeks, and the senator came in and he stopped at my desk in the middle of all this chaos and said, how are you doing? And I said, I'm fine. And he said, okay. And he marched back to his office. And shortly after that, they evacuated us from the Hill. And we were walking across the lawn trying to figure out, do we take the metro? Is it safer to take cars? And all of a sudden we heard this huge explosion. And we now know that it was the sonic boom of the jets being scrambled over the Capitol. But at that time, you had CNN confirming there was a car bomb at the State Department. The Pentagon had collapsed at one point, so we heard that. I finally got on the metro, and they evacuated us for some reason at Pentagon City. So I was standing outside with ash raining down on my head from the Pentagon. And I still didn't even know the area well enough to know, can I walk from here? Where do I, because I was still so new to the city. But eventually I got to my metro stop, my home metro stop. And I just remember that there were all these shuttles from all these different apartment complexes that were helping each other out and trying to get people where they needed to go and making sure that nobody was stranded and everybody could get home. And yeah, that's part of it I like to remember, is that all of us kind of coming together around September 11th and post September 11th to help out our communities and help out our neighbors. And the scary part was the scary part. And then, of course, it was followed, like I already said, quickly with the anthrax scare on Capitol Hill. And so my parents were definitely ready for me to move back to Arizona at that point. But
I'm surprised they didn't come and get you.
I know. What's wild is that there are people that walked out of their offices on September 11th and never returned. Just left everything exactly where they had left it when they were evacuated, and just said this isn't worth it, and moved back to wherever they were from. And I totally sympathize with that. But Senator McCain was one of the biggest proponents for us going immediately back to work, because he didn't want it to be a situation where we were being diverted from the purpose that we had by serving the American people. And so we were back in our offices the very next day. That was no question, we were going to be back in our office the next day, which was obviously weird and stressful, but also I can completely understand why it was that he did that.
It was the right decision, absolutely. And, of course, fast forward to COVID and the day that I'll never forget, which was March 13th, 2020, where we left our offices for what I thought was going to be a matter of weeks, and it ended up being years.
Yeah. Yeah. It's people talk about kind of our generations as having gone through all of these crazy experiences, and, we've kind of all taken them, one at a time as they've come. But if I think about just my time as a post-college adult and the types of things that my generation of people have gone through, it's pretty crazy when you think about it. But I think it's also taught us incredible skills. It's taught us resilience. It's taught us how to deal with stressful situations. It's taught us how to be thoughtful and caring for our neighbors. And those are, obviously I wouldn't wish any of those occurrences again, but it really, I think we also have to focus on what it gave us in return. And hopefully that's some personal and professional growth in a lot of ways.
I absolutely hope so. And I believe that. And that's what we have to look for, the silver lining in everything, and not forget about the bad parts, but there's a silver lining in everything. But Becky, let's fast forward to when you joined Anywhere, and, what did they tell you then that your job was? It's probably shifted a bit, but
it has.
Yes,
it has. It's been an interesting time to have joined the real estate world. So, of all those things I was talking about, you did not hear me mention real estate in there once.
Not yet. Yeah.
Yeah. So I was new to the real estate world when I joined 2 years ago, July. So July of 2022. Coming out of COVID. I had worked at a tech company doing government affairs before coming to Anywhere. So the government affairs wasn't new to me, but real estate was. And the idea at that time was that very, very smartly, our executive, I don't think so, very, very thoughtfully, our executive committee decided, took a look at the landscape and decided that things were probably going to be getting a little bit trickier. National Association of Realtors, which we have seen, they looked and saw that some of our competitors, particularly Zillow, was standing up a pretty aggressive government affairs function. And they decided that, it's important for us to have a seat at that table. If decisions are being made on Capitol Hill, if decisions are being made within the administration, if decisions are being made anywhere in DC, it's really important that we have our own voice and our own seat at that table. So this is actually a really unique function that Anywhere offers its brands. It's, as far as footprint in DC goes, for companies who have a dedicated person who does nothing but government affairs, it really is just the National Association of Realtors, Zillow, and us, and that's it. So it's exciting to be this unique function for our agents, and I love going and talking to our agents about the issues that we're focused on, talk about things that are important to them, getting their feedback on what they're seeing on the ground, especially at the state and local level, because so much of the conversation around policy is driven at the state and local level. And as we all know, agents are so ingrained into their communities. They know everybody knows them. And so they've been amazing resources and boots on the ground for me when I've been trying to navigate some of these tricky conversations too.
Well, it's great. And you and I, of course, saw each other on the conference circuit tour this fall at both Sotheby's and Better Homes and Gardens Real Estate. So, it really impressed me that you're not just doing your job on the Hill and for the executive team, but you're actually sharing it with our broker owners and agents, which is so important because, many feel as though they're in the dark, and, the function that you perform is a very, very important one. So what does a typical week look like now? I mean, we can talk about all of the things that have gone on since you joined in July of 2022. It really, you knew that there would be challenges and opportunities, but there have been many. So let's talk a little bit about that.
Yeah. Yes, challenges and opportunities is that exactly the way that I like to look at it. So every week is different in this job, which is one of the things I really enjoy about it. I am based in Washington, D.C. I don't know if I said that at the start, but I do think that it is important, if you have a government affairs function, to have somebody who has boots on the ground in D.C. who can, drop what they're doing and run to Capitol Hill if they need to, or be downtown, meeting with different trade associations or meeting with different administration officials. I spend a lot of time on Capitol Hill. So in 2023, I did 100 Capitol Hill meetings, which means that I got to sit down with almost a quarter of Congress, which is a lot of Hill meetings.
That's a lot.
Most of those, to be honest, were introductory meetings. A lot of folks hadn't heard of Anywhere before. I was often asked if this was a startup because I came from the tech world, and I had to explain, oh no, and I listed through all of our brands, and then people really understood what a massive company Anywhere was and what a big footprint in the real estate industry it had. But it was just, a lot of those meetings were, like I said, just telling them our story, telling them who we are and what we do in the early days. What I find now is most of my time when I'm talking to people in the political world is really telling the important story of the importance of the agent in the home buying and selling process. I think we're at risk of this narrative getting away from us a little bit in the political world, mostly because what I'm hearing is that housing costs and inventory are the number one issue that constituents are bringing up to their elected officials back home. So their voters are bringing up to elected officials back home. But as we all know, it's a really complicated problem to solve. There's no magic wand that's just going to suddenly build, hundreds of thousands of units or millions of units to help address this problem. And so as elected officials are grappling with these issues, unfortunately, a very small subset, but some have decided that if they can't come up with solutions, they're going to try to come up with a villain. And that villain, in some cases, is going to be real estate agents. But as we sit down and start telling them the personal stories, my personal story of working with my incredible agent, or how my agent stopped us from buying a house that we would not have been able to live in, what I hear more often than not is, oh yeah, I have a relative who has a story like that, or I have a friend who has a story like that, or I have a story like that. So it's about personalizing the agent. And so we're not, painting the industry with this wide brush of, oh, well, if agents would just lower their commissions, housing would be more affordable. It's so much more complicated than that. And there's such a lack of understanding of how this industry really works and how the commission system works and how agents are paid. So I'm up there knocking on doors all day, every week, trying to just tell everybody that, let's take a beat. Let me talk to you about how our industry is. And more often than that, like I said, I do get a positive response from that. But we really all need to be sharing in that goal of trying to connect with people and make sure that our stories are being told.
We absolutely do. And it's something that we've talked about for years, the importance of everyone, including real estate agents, broker owners, brokerages, public companies like ours, just talking about the importance of real estate. I spoke at a conference last week called Blueprint, and the focus was on built technology, but also home builders and how they use technology. And one of the things that I talked about was the importance of getting, more housing starts out there, however that is going to happen, whether it's whether it's a condition of lower interest rates, builders being able to take more calculated risks and pre-building housing. There's just not enough inventory out there. And that is, definitely one of the log jams of our industry. But, on the positive side of things, I've been in this industry for almost 40 years. And when I look back to the start of my career and where I sit today as an advisor, the one thing still rings true, and that is the importance of the relationship between the real estate agent and the end consumer, because it is the largest purchase that most people will make, the most important one, and it's something that you can't do alone. And that, talk a little bit about that, Becky, because I don't think that that's ever going to go away. And I look at technology and it's creating better efficiencies and more sophisticated efficiencies, but that relationship still stands.
Well, I think you make an incredibly good point. And I think this is one of the things that's often missed in this conversation is that if that relationship did go away, the folks that are probably going to be hardest hit and most disadvantaged are the people that maybe need the assistance the most.
Exactly.
So people who have, this is my personal story, but when we bought our condo the first time, we did not use an agent. Huge mistake. We definitely overpaid. There were all kinds of issues. We were lucky we had a great mortgage broker who helped us through some of them, but it was a mess. And then in our second home, we had an incredible agent. She helped us navigate the process. We ended up saving money on the transaction, X, Y, and Z. There are a million reasons why for us having that agent the second time around was great. But if you're talking about somebody who's a first-time home buyer like we were when we didn't use an agent, we absolutely did not know what we were doing. We didn't know what we should be negotiating on. We didn't know the best folks to come in and do the inspection or, help us process paperwork or whatever it might be. And like I said, that transaction didn't go well for us. If you're looking at first-time homebuyers, but also, underserved communities in this area, often what we see is that the trend is that they tend to have smaller down payments, and so they're kind of scraping together money. And if they think that they're going to potentially have to pay a buyer broker for, often we worry that they're going to say, okay, then I'm going to go unrepresented. And then all of these other things that we've seen happen time again are going to happen, which is, again, they overpay. They're maybe in a home that has some issues that they didn't get, discover through the inspection, or they waive things that they shouldn't be waiving. And so there's this idea of, real estate agents lowering their commissions will help make housing more affordable to a larger population. But in reality, if somebody is a second or third time home buyer, or they grew up in a home that was owned, they're going to be much more savvy about that transaction and are probably going to better understand the value of an agent, but are also going to be smarter about how they navigate that situation. Whereas, like I said, those people who are going through it for the first time or don't have families, that they can rely on to help them through that process are going to ultimately be the ones that are disadvantaged by not having a smart, savvy professional there with them. And I think we have a long way to go to figure out how this is all going to shake out. All of this is obviously very new. All the new rules officially went into place in the middle of August.
Yep.
And so this is all really brand new. And I completely understand why people are nervous and trying to figure out what the industry is going to look like. But I think we're all just going to have to take a beat and see how some of these conversations shake out. But I really emphasize, again, going back to this idea of tell your story. Ask your clients to tell your story. If you have a great experience with somebody, make sure that they're evangelizing for you too, and making sure that people really are hearing the voice of the agent and not letting other people tell our story, but really engaging your communities, engage with your elected officials, and make sure that they understand what it is that you do and why it is that you're so important. That would be my number one piece of advice. And at this moment where we're still trying to figure out what's next.
It's great advice, and you've just given me a really good idea for a blog post that I'm going to write about this, and I'll tie it back into this interview. But one final question, and you've given great advice throughout, but this is more of a personal question. And, we know you as an executive, as a very important member of our leadership team, and your function is so incredibly important. But what do you do for fun?
That's a great question. It's funny. At one point I was asked that question years ago, right after I left the Hill, and I completely drew a blank because at that point I felt like all I was doing was working all the time. I will say I love watching baseball. I spend a lot of time at the Washington Nationals baseball park here in DC. My husband is very tolerant of me dragging him to the ballpark quite a bit. We have 2 cats here that I absolutely love. I also volunteer at Cat Shelter, and I volunteer with National Immigration Forum, serving on their board. So I try to also do some volunteer work on the side. And those are the things that keep me busy. And my husband and I we love to travel. We just came back from a couple of weeks in Greece and Italy, and we're planning a cross-country Canadian train trip with my dad, hopefully for this fall. So
Fantastic. Well, being a native Canadian, let's talk offline about that. I'll be happy to give you some tips. But
great. Please.
Now I know something about you that I didn't know. So the baseball part is interesting. So Becky, our time has come to an end. This has been incredible. I know that I'll want to have you back on again to continue the conversation because it's ongoing. Thank you for your time today. And a big thank you from all of us for everything that you do to help make this real estate industry a better place.
Well, thank you so much for letting me join you. I really enjoyed it, and I look forward to the next time.